This is a forward to my podcast. And you may be wondering, why is there a forward to a podcast? Well, if you thought that it's because I have to address a few things, you would be correct. I wanted to address the editing of my podcast. It is intentionally edited that way, with as few spaces as possible between words and sentences. I like how that flows. I think it gives it an edge. It's definitely different than other podcasts I've listened to. I like it. And if there actually is a future podcast, I'll do it again. Or maybe not. But still, though, I like it. It is different. So no, there's nothing wrong with whatever medium, which is probably YouTube, that you're listening to my podcast on. It was intentionally made to sound that way, with as few spaces as possible, like that one. The second thing that I wanted to address is about the content of this podcast. There is a viewer discretion, but there's nothing in this podcast that is so obscene or vulgar that someone under 18 would be prohibited from listening to it. In fact, some of the subject matter covered in this podcast is stuff I would encourage people who are under 18 to talk about with their parents or trusted loved ones, etc. That's actually who should be talking to them about this subject first, in my opinion. But nothing is so vulgar or extreme that it requires a mature rating on at least a YouTube platform, meaning that the viewer discretion is actually because some of the content covers body image issues. Now, speaking of this content, I had a whole list of things I wanted to talk about, and I ended up only covering one thing on that list. Everything else that was on the list, when I listened back to it, it was just less interesting or stuff that I didn't feel like would be as interesting to talk about or as pertinent to talk about as the subject matter that ends up being covered. So I tried to have a light take on a very serious and somewhat dark subject. Without further ado, this is my beta podcast, and I hope you enjoy. This podcast has no name. The podcast with no name, unnamed podcast, the Star Podcast. I'm not sure what to call it yet. I don't even know if I can fill a whole hour, but I did ask ChatGPT to create a list of things I should talk about, topics that affect the generation under me, Gen Z. And when I say under me, I mean younger than me, the upcoming generation. I'm a late stage millennial, aka, as we like to call ourselves, Gen Z elders, people born in the 90s, even though technically we're not really Gen Z. So that's why I prefer late stage millennial, aka Gen Z elder. I did see a pretty funny thing recently by a influencer. His name is, it escapes me right now, but he is basically mocking the notion that millennials who were born in the 90s essentially are pretending to be Gen Z. Pretty much nailed it. I think it was man with no hat, or man carrying thing. Okay, basically 2000 millennial, and I feel like I should play it.
Look at us. Our generation's been through the ringer. The 90s was the last burst of pure joy before the dawn of the digital age. We saw 9/11, lived through the financial crash, and lived to see another day. We were ridiculed and mocked by older generations for buying avocado toast. We are truly one of the better generations. Epic bacon and all.
I'm Gen Z. No, you're definitely not. Well, basically, I am. I have all the same references. iCarly. I grew up with an iPad. When did you get an iPad? In high school.
That makes sense.
What makes sense?
God, you're so cringe. Millennial cringe. You're an old man. I'm young. I watched K-pop Demon Hunters.
So that was that. Point being, I do consider myself a Gen Z elder, aka late stage millennial, aka born in the 90s, but still don't identify with someone born in 1981. Thank you. You were in college, if not graduated already, with a master's degree or doctorate by the time the recession even hit. No, we are not the same. By segment 8, Looksmaxxing trend deep dive. What is it? Why is it rising on the new generation? Up here. So I didn't even know what Looksmaxxing was until I just happened to stumble right into it on TikTok. Once again, I told you all I'm Gen Z, but in all honesty, I saw this. I just thought it was the most ridiculous thing, and I'm just going to call him out by his username, and he's known as on app. His name is Clavicure, kind of like clavicle, like clavicle. And he's had work done. It's not so obvious. If you saw him on his face, it's not so obvious. And mind you, this is someone who I think he's very handsome, just young. So what's up? What's going on? What's it look like? Why is he, for example, planning to have a double jaw cosmetic surgery? Oh, I found the Looksmaxxing community. He proclaimed this himself that he wants to, and I quote, walk into a room and mog people. I heard him say that. What does that even mean? Mog people. Mog. M-O-G. He wants to mog people. He wants to walk into the room and he wants to be like superstar in the room or whatever in his mind. He thinks it would be like the most beautiful man in the world walking through the room and Nas. And I'm like, there's no celebrity in the world. People got excited when Oprah walked in the room. Usually everyone thought they were getting like a free iPad or something, No offense to Oprah, but I'm just saying like no one gets that excited. So it's obviously it's something else going on, right? The Looksmaxxing community is full of this sort of this cringe ideology, which I call it cringe, but I don't even want to call it that because I'm not trying to denigrate these people, because I can see that there's something wrong here, that they need help. And I would never tell someone, here's how you should feel and this is what you should think. I try and get them to think about it differently, for example. So mind you, this clavicle, very handsome man. And then I find out, oh, it's not just he's already had some work done, he's also going to get more work done. The Looksmaxxing community. And that's just one of them. This is the one that I happen to stumble across here. And so basically they have these different ideologies and methods. I had to do my research myself. And I just put it this way, shocked. I got something in my eye. Okay, so in the Looksmaxxing community, they have their own terms and their own codes for things. And one of these things is called the IPD, which stands for interpupillary distance, the gap between the eyes. The canthal tilt, I think I'm saying that right. That's the angle of the eyes. And mewing, which is a tongue exercise. Oh, wait, I'm reading the quote now. The ultimate goal is to improve your SMV, your sexual market value. Sorry, I shouldn't be laughing at any of this. So here's what the ideal look. This is the one thing I did want to go in. Impossibly chiseled jaws, pouty lips, cheekbones as high as Egyptian pyramid, along with the hunter's eye. Eyes angled slightly downwards towards the nose, which is called a positive hand tilt. This is the ideal aesthetic for a man's face in the Looksmaxxing community. So basically, as this whole community is as toxic as it sounds, but it's also led by a bunch of people who are very honest about their insecurities. So they want to go out there and in their mind do something about it, which sometimes might include what they call hard maxing, which is cosmetic surgeries, or soft maxing, which is not cosmetic surgeries, but that'd be like facial lotion or getting a new haircut, or maybe even getting like not your eyebrows waxed, which would never be recommended, eyebrows touched up or something, soft maxing, which there's a case for some soft maxing too. I might add nothing wrong with taking care of yourself, so to speak, but the actual cosmetic surgeries, especially for young people, that's where it's like, okay, that's a little extreme, I think. And instead of just telling them that, though, I really think that the point to make here is that none of these things would ever complete the whole person. Once you get into your later 20s, and you realize that that's true. But these people in this Looksmaxxing community are like in their teens, some of them are just early 20s, just the right age we can actually go get surgeries done. And of course, money does play a factor into some of this. Most people cannot afford surgeries. So you have this whole sort of hierarchy of people in this community. You look at it as a whole, it's just incredibly toxic and not very often I don't want to say underserved, but of all the young men's issues I've heard brought up, I've not heard this one before until I accidentally stumbled into it on a TikTok thing. I'm like, this is a lot of people involved in this here, and this is going to become a problem. But it's been only the last few months that just the community has kind of exploded on TikTok, so to speak. So that was my segment A. And I'm not just, if I really did this whole podcast full, it wouldn't just be like, oh, that's bad. Look at them. Go let them know what they're doing is toxic. Like, no. It's deeper than that. It's deeper. There's in a lot of ways, a lot of females, I'm sure, would say, well, welcome to the club, boys. And you know what? They'd be right. They would be completely right. And my point to them would be, you're right. But also, this is different. Which, by the way, it's really about the incel community, which I do call it that. But I just wanted to say, and it's always sort of bothered me, it gives celibacy a bad reputation, which is, I know that's like a ridiculous take to have on it, but a more proper term would be the involuntarily abstinent community. And I just don't think it has the same it doesn't flow off the tongue as well, so to speak. But so we'll call it the incel community. These men basically hate themselves and blame women for all their problems, their own insecurities or someone else, which is very easy to do, is blame someone else for their problems. But then if your own problem becomes how you look, now you see why I said that this thing is dangerous. Why the Looksmaxxing community is specifically so dangerous. Because if you're blaming, like in the incel community, if women are responsible for all your problems, and one of your problems is that you don't like how you look, because the Looksmaxxing community has basically convinced you so, and that still becomes a woman's problem, doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you kind of point out what it is they're doing, because so obviously these problems are rooted in oneself, and you're blaming someone else for them. And you're making it worse and making them feel worse about themselves because you're telling them it's also their fault. They feel bad about themselves. And not a whole lot of people, I think, are willing to do it. Try and extend extend a knowledge range. I don't. The problem is that you don't like how you look, and that's a problem you have. And also, at the same time, you blame all of your problems on someone else, which is what the incel community is. How are you going to blame someone else for how you look? Thus, the toxicity of Looksmaxxing. It's my first podcast review. Okay, we need, for example, we need for me to re-record this podcast in a way that actually makes sense. Less mumbling, maybe. Talking about it will help. Opening up those discussion lines, so to speak, a way of having discussions in a safe place, in a safe way, in a respectful way, of course. I think that would be very beneficial to some of the people. Also, out of how you try to draw out the big picture, right? Zoom out, I should say. Point out the flaws in the thinking and logic, I think, that is what a movement like Looksmaxxing is, or the incel community represents, because inherently there are flaws. But you have to do that respectfully, right? When you talk, because you don't want to push them down any further, right? and which could cause more problems than it actually prevents. And always leave with a good message too. I always say that hope is very important, but if there's one thing I know about hope, we threw around that word a lot when I was younger, is, late stage millennial, Gen Z, whatever age I am, getting up their age. My point is that they threw around the word hope a lot, and they're right. Hope is good. We could always use more hope, right? What I know for sure, though, is you need hope and a plan. And I'm going to leave it at that. That's been my first podcast. I'm going to re-record the whole thing, but yeah, people need hope, but we need hope and a plan. This I know for sure, as someone who's a late-stage millennial, Gen Z elder, born somewhere in the 90s. Thank you.